Hi, I'm Jen. Welcome to my channel, Christian Fire Poppy. Before I give my report on the 21-day challenge, I just have to comment on the stunning young adult devotional given by President Oaks, and particularly the words of his wife, who says that we are under attack. And I absolutely love President Oaks and Sister Oaks. They're actually family friends that go way back with my dad and my grandfather. So my grandpa actually lived just across the street from President Oaks, and my dad was a young child at the time. At the time, my grandfather was a patriarch, and President Oaks was serving as a Sunday school teacher. And he says that he would, when President Oaks was gone, he was busy as a jurist at this time, I believe, working for the government. And my grandpa would substitute for him in Sunday school when he needed it. And there's kind of a funny story that my dad tells. My dad says, I remember the day that President Oaks was called to be an apostle. He was outside walking around the neighborhood as a kid, and he saw this cute little kitten that was wandering around, and he thought to himself, I'm pretty sure that this kitten belongs to one of the Oaks family's kids. So he went over to the house, and he knew that President Oaks was gone a lot. He was very busy. So he fully expected one of the children to answer the door, and he knew that he had just been called as an apostle. I believe it was the same day or the day after. And he says that when he's holding this kitten in his hands, and when the door opened, it was President Oaks himself, and he was so shocked to see him that he was home there and he had just been called as an apostle that he just threw the kitten at him and ran away. And anyways, it's kind of funny. So I have a lot of interesting family stories related to them. So my ears kind of perk up when President Oaks speaks. And let's see. So let's take a look at what he was saying. So I really want to highlight what Sister Oaks was saying as her closing words. I was listening to her yesterday while getting dinner ready, and her words stopped me in my tracks. So I started vigorously writing on the back of my daughter's spelling test and writing down the words that she was saying, because I could not believe that they were talking about the brazen serpent and the fiery flying serpents that were biting the children of Israel, and what she had to say. So I want to share with you the words that she said, and then I'll share with you why this was so surprising and how this was already on my mind. I actually had already been preparing a video about this, but I was kind of fighting myself, trying to decide if I should. I had a lot of hangups, not wanting to, but feeling like these ideas and thoughts kept coming to me about this story and about the symbolism and just the story of how we look to this serpent on the staff as being Jesus Christ. So let's see. I have been thinking a lot. It's something that actually, when President Nelson came and visited the Safefield Field and came to our area, that's when I first started just really looking at the symbolism. And so I want to talk a lot about some of the symbolism and kind of insights and patterns that I see there. So let me just read to you what I wrote down that she said. So this is what I was vigorously writing. And here you see my daughter. She did a good job on her spelling test. So he says, so he introduces his wife and says that she's going to be giving the closing words. And this is what she says. We all know the story of the children of Israel being attacked by poisonous serpents in the wilderness, but tonight it is your story too. So this is our story of the fiery serpents attacking us. And really, this whole devotional was really a voice of warning. I felt like they were just warning about all the perils of the day and the messages that are being pushed on us, but especially dangerous to our youth, to our young people who are making big life decisions, deciding when to get married, if they want to get married, if they want to have kids. And so many of the world's messages are destroying this idea that the family is sacred and special. And so this is what she says. She says, as God ordered, Moses fashioned a staff that symbolized our Savior, Jesus Christ. Then Moses told everyone to look up, and they would be healed from their wounds. Just like the Israelites, we are under attack for various beliefs we hold sacred. I ask you to look to God and live. Look to the words spoken tonight, the words of our prophet, the scriptures, the plan of salvation, and your patriarchal blessings. They talked a lot about the plan of salvation. That was actually when Elder Christofferson came and visited. One part of the homework that he gave us, which I was able to do this week, was to write a one-page essay on the plan of salvation. This is the antidote to the world's distorted views on the purpose of life. So she says, pray and the Lord will be with you. That does not mean any of us will go unscathed, but the Lord will be with us. It does mean we will not be alone, and we will go forward guided and protected from the evil around us. It means we will know the truth and relish in the Spirit. I invite you to look to God and live. We've spoken about the plan of salvation, all three acts that have been revealed, especially the purpose of mortal life, marriage and children, to know Jesus Christ, to have faith, the two great commandments, to love God and to love your neighbor, both should be observed. And we urge that we be of good cheer. So despite the fact that they're giving this warning of these fiery flying serpents, we should be of good cheer because if we look to God and live, no matter what is happening and what our circumstances are, that is the solution. And so it's a plan of happiness, and our Savior is the way and the truth and the life. So those were the closing remarks from the devotional. And the reason it stopped me in my tracks was because so many things just kept, this story was just bombarding me in so many different ways. I kept thinking of these different thoughts. But hearing that from Sister Oakes's mouth was just the cherry on top. So I was really excited to share what I already had been planning to share, and it was definitely confirmed that was the right way to go. So I would actually really strongly recommend going onto Google and just Googling, or going onto YouTube and Googling the bronze serpent, the chosen. So in the movie The Chosen, the depiction of Jesus and the scriptures and the various stories, and they take some license. It's not exactly the words of the Bibles. They add more character development. If you haven't seen it, I really love The Chosen, but if you watch that section of where Moses is fashioning the bronze serpent, it's really good. It kind of just gets you really thinking about that story. It's just a 2-minute clip of that video that you can look at, but Moses is fashioning the bronze serpent on the staff, and it shows Joshua standing behind him, questioning Moses and saying that the people need medical help. He's saying the people are dying, they need medical help. What are you doing? And Moses is doing this bronze work over the fire. And he says, we need to start burying all the people. The bodies are piling up. And why in the world is Moses he says, why are you making a pagan-looking bronze serpent during this emergency? And he just responds that it's not my idea. He says, it's an act of God. It's an act of faith, not reason. And he gave all the examples of parting the Red Sea and how so many of the solutions to their problems it was inspiration from God. It did not make sense by reason, but was inspiration and needed to be acted on by faith. So they both knew that the people were absolutely going to scoff at this thing. But it was a test and a reminder to look to God and to live. And that still applies to us today. So it was a living prophet pointing to Christ. So Moses was lifting up that staff. So I've been thinking on all the thoughts that came to me. So this took me back, and it's been so interesting because when Elder Christofferson came, I feel like the Spirit keeps pointing me back to lessons that I learned when President Nelson came. And I was thinking on how when he visited Seattle, I did the 21-day challenge at that time. And in a lot of ways, this 21-day challenge was a way to overcome the effects of, the world that kind of wears on us. And for me, thinking about the symbol, when President Nelson came, I kind of, in my mind, I love symbols, and I love to, in my own mind, create symbols that have meaning, that I can just think about that image or that picture, and it kind of sums up all the various things that I have learned and discovered. And when President Nelson came, I just had the thought that the symbol of the bronze serpent on the staff, particularly the caduceus sign, which is the staff with the snake and also the wings on the top, that is representative for medical healing. And now I know that people are going to say, well, the caduceus, the medical staff, that is different from the bronze serpent that Moses held up. And I understand, and I know people think too also, well, the Caduceus staff, that's pagan, or that's a cult. But I can tell you, symbolism, the power of symbolism is it's whatever you make it. And every symbol that has been around for a long time, you can show that it's connected to the occult, and you can show that it's connected to God. And I think no matter what, God has symbols, and Satan always tries to take those symbols and turn them and take them upon himself. And so I think every symbol, you can make the argument that that's pagan or that's of Satan. But if you can also, there's a lot of reasons and research and evidence showing that it is of God as well, that it can remind you of godly things. And like I said, so this is just my own opinions and thoughts. While we're at it, everything in this video is just my own opinions and thoughts, and I am not a representative for the church. So I'm just sharing some symbols, and maybe some of this symbolism will help to stick into your mind too, because I have a terrible memory, so images will stay with me. So looking at the staff used by Moses, this is, I love how, if you look at, let me actually pull up here to share. So this is a picture of President Oaks when he actually came to, he visited with my parents in Chicago, and they had a great time talking about, all their old family memories and things. And let's see, so when Sister Oaks was talking about the story, she showed this picture of Moses and the serpent on the staff. So this is a prophet, a living prophet, pointing our minds to Jesus Christ and his healing powers. And oftentimes in the world, we think, well, we need to do this, or we need to change. And we think of political, like we need to address it physically, but we forget that turning to God is the real answer. And so let's look at the caduceus. So I want to just tie the symbol of the caduceus. I feel like this symbol, if I were to just create a symbol in my mind, would represent a lot of the things that President Nelson has done since he's became prophet, or ties in with a lot of the changes in the church, the things that are happening. So if you look at it, it has the wings here. And so for me, that just reminds me how when President Nelson became prophet, he started talking about the higher and holier changes. As a prophet too, one of the first things he did was to really focus that we are not called Mormons, we're called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he keeps bringing us back to focusing on Christ. So he's a prophet that is always pointing us to Christ. He's always pointing us to turn to Christ and to hear him, and to live in higher and holier ways with the wings. And then I love this idea of this medical staff, medical healing, since President Nelson is a doctor, the heart surgeon, who actually really enjoyed reading his biography, how him and his wife basically invented the heart-lung machine, and he came up with just so many different ways to help people and to heal hearts and to save lives. And so the caduceus pretty much reminds me of a lot of what President Nelson is trying to do. So look to Christ and live. So something that's kind of cool is that the Come Follow Me this week, when I look at this wings, this brings me to a couple different scriptures that I thought of when President Nelson came and visited. I feel like the Spirit really pointed me to this idea. So I did the 21-day challenge, and I felt like it tied into the idea of rising up with wings of eagles and having renewed strength and vigor. And so let's take a look at in the Come Follow Me. Let's see. Here we go. So this section in the Joseph Smith Matthew 1, which is basically Matthew chapter 24 in the Bible, verse 27, it says, "And now I show unto you a parable. Behold, wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. So likewise shall mine elect be gathered from the four quarters of the earth." And I love how this week is all about the second coming. And I feel like President Nelson is such a prophet that more than any other prophet has talked about the second coming. So it's yet to be seen if he will be the prophet of the second coming or the prophet of a period of time leading into the second coming. But definitely talk and references and preparing for the second coming really began with his presidency. And so Matthew 24 is really amazing. It's the scripture where Christ talks in depth to his disciples, those who are close to him, about the second coming and what to look for. And this parable, I love this idea of the eagles. There's actually two translations. It can be translated as eagles, but also as vultures or condors. So condors are kind of vulture. And I love that President Nelson is this higher and holier, having the Spirit message that he's always giving. And I actually made a note. So when he visited, let me show you something that I wrote down in my journal. When he visited, I made a note that I felt like he was a prophet, that when the Spirit that I felt, I had this wings imagery in my mind, and I was studying all these scriptures about eagles and birds that fly high. And I read that condors are the highest flying. Condors fly, which are a type of vulture, fly even higher than the eagles. So let me pull that up. Did it go? Okay. There we go. Okay, so this is what I wrote. So up here on top, I was writing about the 21-day challenge, and in connection to the 21 challenge, I wrote that, renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. I also read the scripture today, which describes my feelings. For my soul delighteth in the scriptures, and my heart pondereth them, and write at them for the learning and the profit of my children. Behold, my soul delighteth in the things of the Lord, and my heart pondereth continually upon the things which I have seen and heard. And I just really have this feeling that as we study the scriptures and as we listen to the words of the prophet, he will point our minds to Christ, and we will be given strength and energy and everything that we need to do what it is we need to do with our lives. So this is where I wrote right after the prophet had visited. I said, yesterday was quite the day. The prophet told us to go home and ponder what we had learned. And I felt like in the morning, I was tempted to not go to church. The baby was borderline sick, and Mary seemed like she had a UTI. So I stayed home with them. I felt like, oh, they're too sick. I need to stay home with them. And that was fine. But after everybody had left, it just seemed like they were better. I changed my mind. They seemed like, no, actually they do seem fine. But a part of me wanted to just stay home and sleep. I was tired. But another part of me realized this was a temptation. They were fine. I could take them to church a little bit late. And I noted that the Spirit had been strong since the prophet came to the heights of a condor. So I had this imagery. And anyways, and there, it was kind of cool because the high counselor spoke about fasting, and it was just what I needed to hear. The day that the prophet came, I had been fasting that day, and I had been doing the 21-day challenge, and I was thinking, am I fasting too much? Is fasting really, is it worth it? I mean, I knew it was worth it, but I was thinking maybe I'm going overboard with this. And it was a talk that was all about fasting, and I felt like that was such a good answer to what I was wondering. And let me go, here we go. So, and then, okay, so I was thinking about that, and then I noticed on here, so honestly, I'm hesitant to bring up John Pratt's work because I completely do not recommend any of his spiritual pieces that he writes, any of his explanation of things. I don't agree with his views. But I do think there is something to his early work. So his early work, like the facts where he talks about sacred calendars and he does research into the Book of Enoch and holy calendars and things like that. I think there's something to that. And I found him through just being published in the Ensign. So he was legitimate early on. And I think the foundations of his work, the facts and the research, there's something to some of it. But everything else, especially anything recent, I do not recommend because he fell away from the church and went off into strange paths. And I think that is just a risk that happened. I mean, and I just follow the pattern of the church. I don't feel like I have to cancel every single thing that he put out, the facts of just research and dates, or the work that he did when he was on the path. He used to be a good staunch member of the church, publishing an Ensign. And so I look at what happened with the early apostles who were witnesses to things that happened or who had inspiration, but then later fell away. And we don't cancel all their work. We just reference their work when they were on the path, or anyways, the facts and research pulled on their own, which, like I said, I'm not super into it, but it's just weird to me how sometimes I do feel like the Spirit will say, oh, just look at this date or look at this, and it ties into what I'm thinking. So this is just one of those weird things where I wanted to look at President Nelson's birthday. And so September 9th, 1924 was when he was born, and he was born on 13 Condor. So it just supports that idea that President Nelson is kind of tied to this imagery of wings and flying high. So go to, so I was talking to my sister-in-law, and on 10/18/18, I said, what a day. And on 10/18/18, no less. 8 has always been my number. This morning I replied to this email from Lisa. It was a family group email. Thank you for the inspiration, Jenny. Your report of endless energy reminds me of Isaiah 40:31. But they that await upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. And then she says, I plan to start the 21-day challenge once I've completed President Nelson's Book of Mormon challenge, Lisa. So this is my other sister-in-law. So I'm communicating. I'm telling everybody I had this great experience. You have to do the 21-day challenge. And anyways, and I told her, that's so funny you should say that, Lisa. So I've been thinking about this eagle imagery, and it was so interesting that I had not spoken about that to her, and she just sent that to me, that came into her mind. And I said, I consider these scriptures to explain the moment of time we are in. Revelation 12, the church is in a time of strengthening. We are especially strengthening our children for what they will have to face. Make this a little bit bigger. President Nelson spoke of exponential increasing ways Satan is attacking as time goes on. So again, that ties into this brazen serpent, the serpents that are attacking. Invest in teaching children. So Luke 17 is a time of gathering. He's speaking of gathering Israel a lot. So this idea of the eagles gathering, and the scripture here that we talked about, this is so much, this, to me, I think of the eagles are gathered together, or the vultures, the condors are gathered together, and they're feasting on the carcass, which is the body of Christ. Every Sunday we get together and we partake of the sacrament, we partake of the body and the blood of Jesus Christ. So this is how you stay on the path. This is how we gather. In the end of days, this is a place of safety, is Zion. You go where the members of the church are gathering together to partake of the ordinances of the gospel, and we stay together as Zion. So this is this idea of gathering, and you know, the President Nelson is always talking about this gathering. So let me back to that. And then in Job 39, it says, parenting is needed for protection. Feed your children the word and a redeeming blood of Christ. Be an eagle parent, not an ostrich parent. Be on the lookout for evil and build your nest on the high, safe rock of Jesus Christ. So then I noted in Revelation 12, and when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child, and to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, and times, and half a time from the face of the serpent. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood, which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And then it says, so in Luke 17, it says, 2 women shall be grinding together, the one shall be taken and the other left. 2 men shall be in the field, the one shall be taken and the other left. And they answered and said unto him, where, Lord? And he said unto them, wheresoever the body is, thither will the eagles be gathered together. Sorry, I keep clicking off of that. And then it says that this is about the eagle parenting. So he says, this he spake, signifying the gathering of his saints, and of the angels descending and gathering the remainder unto them, the one from the bed, the other from the grinding, and the other from the field, wheresoever he listeth. For verily there shall be a new heaven and a new earth wherein dwelleth righteousness. And there shall be no unclean thing, for the earth becoming old, even as a garment, having waxed in corruption. Wherefore it vanisheth away, and the footstool remaineth sanctified, cleansed from all sin. And then Job 39 uses this eagle imagery to talk about how eagles are good parents. So Job 39, it says, Gavest thou the goodly wings unto the peacocks, or wings and feathers unto the ostrich? So the ostrich, which leaveth her eggs in the earth, and warmeth them in dust, that the beast may break them. So if you're an ostrich parent, you're not closely watching and protecting your children from evil. So she's hardened against her young ones as though they were not hers. Her labor is in vain without fear. So no fear of God, no fear of the repercussions of spirituality, because God hath deprived her of wisdom, neither hath imparted to her understanding. So if you don't have wings, you don't have understanding, you don't have wisdom, you don't understand the spiritual things that are happening. And then it says, Doth the hawk fly by thy wisdom and stretch her wings toward the south? Doth the eagle mount up at thy command and make her nest on high? She dwelleth and abideth on the rock, upon the crag of the rock in the strong place. From thence she seeketh the prey, and her eyes behold afar off. So she's seeking the ordinances, the gospel. She's seeking for Jesus Christ and feeding that to her children. Her young ones also suck up blood, and where the slain are, there is she. So again, this rising generation, we're teaching. We are eagle parents, eagle mothers, eagle fathers. We are teaching our children about Jesus Christ, and we are seeing the evils, we're seeing the dangers, and we're protecting our children. Now, it was kind of cool. I remember when I was studying this, I made a note on here that I had sorted through these eagle scriptures in the email, because I was able to then later share this story with a friend. As I was thinking about this, I had actually taken my children to the pumpkin patch, and as they were there, I got a warning from the Spirit that I need to quickly check on my children. And I was with some of my kids in one area, but my other kids had gotten out of sight a little bit, and I thought they were with my husband, but he had kind of wandered a little bit. So neither one of us, we each thought the other parent was watching them. So I ran to them, and I saw it was not a very good situation. There were two men that really gave me a bad feeling. They were not there with kids of their own, and they were trying to talk to my children. It was not in a very safe spot. I thought that where we were was safe, but these two men just appeared out of nowhere, and I was able to gather up my children, escort them away. And then my husband showed up, and as soon as my husband showed up, they just took off, and I didn't see them. And then as we were driving home, I actually saw an eagle flying. I looked out the window and I saw an eagle flying with a snake in its mouth. And it just reminded me to be an eagle parent, that we need to watch out. There's danger in the world and spiritual dangers, and we need to protect our children. And we do that by listening to the Spirit. And it actually reminded me of the symbol of the Mexican flag and how Mexico was established. That was the sign that the people of Mexico looked for, was an eagle with a serpent in its mouth sitting on a cactus. When they saw that, they knew that's where they were going to build their city. And I shared this with a friend who was Mexican, and I told her about it and what I had been studying about eagles and how to be a good parent. And then I was able to share a Book of Mormon with her, and it really, anyways, and I'm continuing to share that with her today. But it was kind of a cool, anyways, I love symbolism. I love imagery. So hopefully some of this sticks with you. Something else that I noted at this time. So right at the time after President Nelson came, I wrote down that here it says, here was a man serving the, let's see, make it smaller. Here was a man saying, I believe in the dead prophets that lived 1,000+ years ago, but I have great difficulty believing in a living prophet. That attitude is also taken toward God. To say that the heavens are sealed and there is no revelation today is saying we do not believe in a living Christ today or living God today. We believe in a one long since dead and gone. So this term living prophet has real significance. And at the same time, my husband, he came home with this is the caduceus sign, and it was this belt buckle that one of his patients that my husband was taking care of, who was battling cancer, was just really appreciative of the healthcare that my husband was giving, and he gave him this belt buckle, and it had the letter D, which was my husband's name, and he felt like anyways, kind of a long story, but he gave that to my husband, and it was just so cool that it was at this time that I was studying this symbolism, and I had made these notes about it as well, that there's actually a connection between, if you go back to the history of the caduceus, that it could be a sign of Enoch, a seer and a revelator, and the Hermes tradition, that story rose from the story of Enoch. So there is this line of thinking, and there is some evidence showing that perhaps this Greek myth of Hermes rose from the actual story of the prophet Enoch. So again, that ties into the whole idea of the second coming, and President Nelson talking about the second coming a lot. So I said that he was reputed to be the first discoverer of the harmony and principle of voices or sounds, and the inventor of the musical instrument called the lyre. So we're talking about Hermes here. So the myth part of it. So he taught men letters, astronomy, and the rites of religion, and who gave the instrument three tones: the treble, bass, and tenor. The first to accord with summer, the second with winter, and the third with spring. The Egyptians likened humanity to a flock of sheep. The supreme and inconceivable father was the shepherd, and Hermes was the shepherd dog. The origin of the shepherd's crook in religious symbolism used by the Pope today may be traced to these Egyptian rituals. So there's all these different things that tie in. So if we actually go to, let me find it. So if we go to, I found this interesting article. It was written by Joseph Gill. It says that Joseph Gill has talked for over 8 hours on national syndicated talk shows with 6 to 7 million listeners about symbolism and the simple origins of our different world religions. After many personal requests, Joseph has put together this simple picture documentary article for easy understanding. And it says that this paper is given after 40 years of research and thousands of books and 50 years of travel, personally visiting hundreds of churches and temples in over 100 countries. So he was looking at it from a religious perspective and how the caduceus ties into religion. So I found this on studylib.net, Joseph Gill, if you wanted to look up that. But let me go back to, it's a lot on there. So I'm going to go show you just some of the notes that I had taken about that. Let's see if I can get to that. Okay. So this is what I wrote down back then about what I was studying. And I said that, let's see. So Hermes Trismegistus and the great dragon. So Hermes was tied to the planet Mercury. The word was reason, and by the reason of the word, invisible things were made manifest. Let's see. And it looks like that second part got cut off. So let me actually go back to that. The origins. We'll get through this. So there we go. There are all these different pictures. So here is Hermes with the caduceus in his hand and fighting with the dragon. So let's see. We'll read a little bit about kind of the history of Hermes. So Hermes, of all creatures, was nearest to God and became known as the messenger of the gods. The Egyptians regarded him as the god of wisdom, letters, and the recording of time, which that's kind of interesting connected to Enoch. If you read the book of Enoch and how he talks about calendars and time and those things, is in consequence of the great respect entertained for Hermes by the old alchemists that chemical writings were called hermetic, and the phrase hermetically sealed is still in use to designate the closing of a glass vessel by fusion. Let's see. And then it talks about kind of the shepherd's hook and how that ties in. And he also, it was said of him that he was the inventor of music, and the first instrument, the instrument called the lyre. He taught men letters, astronomy, and rites of religion, and who gave the instruments three tones. Let's see. And then one of the most interesting things is, let me see if I can find it. Right here at the top, he says that Hermes was universal wisdom, standing on the head of ignorance, fear and perversion, and the devourer of souls. So he carries the caduceus, and it was said that the caduceus would wake people up. You would touch them with it, and it could heal, or it would wake people up out of their sleep. And I want to find the part where it shows that. Basically, he ties it back to saying that it is tied to Enoch, that it's tied to the prophet Enoch originally. But I am having trouble finding that. But let me show you here. So if you go just to Wikipedia, the caduceus, so it says the caduceus is the staff carried by Hermes in Greek mythology and consequently by Hermes Trismegistus in Greco-Egyptian mythology. The same staff was also borne by heralds in general. For example, by Iris, the messenger of Hera, is a short staff entwined by two serpents, sometimes surmounted by wings. In Roman iconography, it was often depicted being carried in the left hand of Mercury, the messenger of the gods. Some accounts suggest that the oldest known imagery of the caduceus has its roots in Mesopotamia, with a Sumerian, his symbol, and a staff with two snakes. So as a symbolic object, it represents Hermes, and by extension, trades, occupations, and undertakings associated with the gods. Thus, through its use in astrology, alchemy, and astronomy, it has come to denote the planet Mercury, and by extension, the planetary metal that now has the same name. It is said the wand would wake the sleeping and send the awake to sleep. If applied to the dying, their death was gentle. If applied to the dead, they returned to life. So it's kind of, it's an interesting thought that perhaps Enoch was the very beginning and then it just morphed into this Greek myth and now it's turned into this symbol of medicine. So interesting things. Let me share with you. So I kind of like how this ties into Enoch and just the idea that Enoch is such a prophet of the second coming and the New Jerusalem. And that's what President Nelson talks about. So now, so kind of connected to that. So if we're looking at if you have the theory that President Nelson is the prophet of the second coming, that we're getting closer to the second coming, I like to think, well, what is it that we would be seeing? And in the scriptures, it talks about signs of the second coming and the sun turning to darkness and the moon turning to blood and signs in the skies. And in my previous video, I talked about all the things that happened right before President Nelson was called to be a prophet. And in August of 2017, you had the beginning of the solar eclipse. So we had the sun darkening, and that eclipse happened on President Monson's birthday. And then that next spring, that was when President Nelson became the prophet. And at the same time, and this was brought up by Jared at Christian Homestead Channel, and he brought up that there was another phenomenon in the sky, and I had not. So I just recently, I thought, I'm kind of curious. I want to look into that and see what that's all about. I'm not aware of it, but let me show you guys. I found something kind of interesting how this event ties into Hermes and the prophet Enoch. And so it was that thing, that astronomical event called Oumuamua, so it happened at that same time as all of these other things in the fall of 2017. So here on Wikipedia, it says Oumuamua is the first interstellar object detected passing through the solar system. So this is a first ever thing to happen. Formally designated blah, 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 U1, it was discovered by Robert Work on October 2017, approximately 40 days after it passed its closest point to the sun on September 9th. So anyways, I found that kind of interesting, just as far as numbers and symbolism go, that it was close to the sun, and that is what I've said. That's kind of goes with the myth of Hermes, that he was really close to the sun. And so it says that, let's see, let me go to, so Oumuamua, one thing that was interesting about it as well is it came out of Lyra. So if you go to Lyra, so they actually have put forth, in the astronomy world, they have put forth, there's so much interest in this Oumuamua, this one-time thing, that they want to learn more about it, and they're calling it Project Lyra. So let me tell you about Project Lyra. So Project Lyra is a feasibility study of a mission to interstellar objects such as Oumuamua. And it says that in January 2022, research proposed that a spacecraft launched from Earth could catch up to Oumuamua in 26 years for further close-up studies. But they have other options. Options suggested initially for sending a spacecraft to Oumuamua within a time frame of 5 to 10 years were based on a launch in 2021 and required traveling first to Jupiter to conduct a flyby, followed by a close solar flyby in order to take advantage of the birth effect. Subsequent research revealed further launch possibilities, notably in 2030 or 2033, using the same scenario, except the 2030 launch, but with a total flight duration of 22 years. Thus, there are still future opportunities for a mission to Oumuamua. So furthermore, other trajectory options have been explored. So one of the reasons that they're calling it Project Lyra is because that is where this interstellar object came from, and they're just interested in how it was traveling through and seeming to move and travel. But if you look at Lyra, we talked about this idea. So Lyra is a small constellation. It is one of the 48 listed by the second century astronomer Ptolemy, and is one of the modern 88 constellations recognized by the International Astronomical Union. Lyra was often represented on star maps as a vulture or an eagle carrying a lyre. So, and hence is sometimes referred to as vulture cadence or Aquila cadence or falling eagle, respectively. Beginning at the north, Lyra is bordered by Draco, so there you have the dragon next to it. And Lyra is nearly overhead in temperate northern latitudes. And it says that Vega, Lyra's brightest star, is one of the brightest stars in the night sky. And so it's connected to Hermes. And we already talked about how Hermes is connected to Enoch and this messenger of the gods and closest to the sun. So bringing this message from God. In Greek mythology, Lyra represents the lyre. So we talked about the lyre, the musical instrument, made by Hermes from a tortoise shell given to Apollo as a bargain. It was said to be the first lyre ever produced. And Orpheus's music was said to be so great that even inanimate objects such as rocks could be charmed. So join in Jason and Argonauts. His music was able to quell the voices of the dangerous sirens who sang tempting songs to Argonauts. So if this has remnants to actual truths of Enoch, it's pretty interesting in the sense that here we have, like I said, for me, this is just all symbolism. I'm not basing any of my religious belief or doctrine or anything like that. This is more just reading about history, reading about myths, and kind of just tying it all together to create interest and support just the symbolism of the things that I already know. I mean, everything that I know about President Monson, that we have living prophets and apostles, Jesus is the Christ, and they are pointing us to Christ. I mean, that's everything. So don't get mixed up. Or what I'm trying to say is that these are just sideline interesting notes that add kind of relish and help me to kind of remember and think about this imagery and the symbolism. So this is my own personal symbolism, and I think it's kind of cool that there is some mythology and history and possible connections that kind of connect it all together. So thinking about that. So we have that imagery of the wings, and we have that vulture again there, the condor, and it's just pretty cool that all this imagery of wings and higher and holier and the lyre and Enoch and all of this, that this, first everything that happened up in space in astronomy happened right before President Nelson was called. So all of these things help me to remember the words of President Nelson and what it is that he's trying to tell us, and that he is a messenger. He's giving us a message from God that we need to be careful. So here, to quell the voices of the dangerous tyrants. So just like Sister Oak said, there are fiery flying serpents. We're living in dangerous times. There are dangerous voices, and we need to listen to the prophet who is telling us to listen to our Savior, Jesus Christ. So kind of cool tie-ins, I thought. So I think that basically sums it up. And hopefully you will not misconstrue or mix up any of the mythology or symbolism. It's just, like I said, it's on the foundation of the gospel, the basics: love God, love your neighbor. and look to God and live. But so now that we talked about that, I just wanted to, I guess, give just a quick, so far, the 21-day challenge has been going really well, and I can feel the rewards. I can feel that it's definitely charging my batteries and giving me refreshment. And anytime we do anything having to do with ordinances and family history, I definitely start feeling those effects right away. And, it was such a last minute idea, but I felt like it was from the Spirit. So I pressed forward, and I actually this last week went on a family vacation that we had planned a long time ago. So logically, I would not have planned this challenge and this fast during that time because it was very challenging to do well on a family vacation. But at the same time, I was able to continue with it, stick with it. I was definitely not perfect because it was a greater challenge than when I'm just at home doing my normal routine. But I took on the challenge. It's been going good. I've been seeing the blessings. I've had some really amazing experiences. Probably most of the experiences I don't feel comfortable sharing, but so far it has been just really good. And I hope that you guys are doing it as well, and that you're feeling the Spirit and feeling like it's charging up your spiritual batteries and getting you excited. And hopefully you're diving into the scriptures as you're doing it. And as we're learning this week in Come Follow Me, the way to not be deceived is to treasure up the words. And so go read that I'm not going to pull it up, but it is in there in Matthew 1, Joseph Smith, about we're given the key to not being deceived. And it is not to just read the words, but to treasure up the words. And so that's what we need to do. And that's how we need to protect ourselves from the fiery flying serpents. And well, anyways, thanks for listening. This went much longer than I thought, but I hope you guys, I would love to hear how your 21-day challenge is going. So please let me know. And I hope you guys have a great day and a great week.